The signal came in at 0412, station time, while I was 3 cups into a shift I hadn't chosen to start, and a cup of synthry I hadn't chosen to enjoy. I almost missed it. It arrived on a frequency we hadn't heard in 47 years of my career. A colonial registration broadcast, formatted in a legal code so old that the array's translation layer flagged it as a dialect anomaly before it flagged it as anything else. The computer wanted to shelve it as noise. I told the computer to sit down. I recognized it. Every signals officer posted to New Karath's orbital communications array recognized it. It was the first thing they taught us, before we learned antenna calibration, or deep-range decryption protocols, or how to file a quarterly bandwidth report without losing the will to live. They made us memorize what an old Vorreth Continuance registration pulse looked like, because the intelligence files said the continuance still had dormant territorial claims scattered across the outer arm, and the intelligence files said someday they might actually come to collect. The files were right. 22 ships. Decelerating hard, course plotted for the coordinates of Old Earth. I sat back in my chair and let that settle. Old Earth, not New Karath, not the orbital ring, not the shipyards at Vel Moran, not any of the 63 habitated systems humanity had built or borrowed in 45,000 years of expansion. They had come for Old Earth, the original, the abandoned, the deliberate ruin, and they were broadcasting a territorial claim they had filed 50,000 years ago, before my species had worked bronze, before we had looked up at the stars and understood what they were. The Vorreth had owned it on paper before we had ever known to want it. I keyed my superior's channel. He was asleep. I let him sleep. This was my watch. I pulled up the old files instead, the ones all signals officers kept indexed but rarely opened, because opening them meant something was actually happening, and I read, for the 100th time in my career, and the first time in earnest, what humanity had left behind when the last evacuation ships cleared Old Earth's gravity well, 45,000 years ago. We had not left in panic. That was the thing people always got wrong about the Exodus. There had been centuries of warning, the sun's slow swell, patient as mathematics, unmistakable to anyone who cared to look. We had time. We used it. When the last ship lifted from the last port, every human being who had wanted to leave had already left. The ones who stayed, and there were a few, the old ones, the ones too tired or too rooted, had chosen to stay. We did not speak of them in the files. That grief was too old and too personal for filing. What we did speak of was what we built before we went. The Sentinel Grid, 41 automated defense platforms, seeded into Old Earth's orbital shell in the final decades of the evacuation. Not weapons, exactly, or not only weapons. The grid was never designed to fight. It was designed to remember. Each platform carried a full registry of every human being ever recorded on Old Earth's surface, a census running from the first scratched marks in the first cities, up through the final embarkation roll call. Every name, every lineage. 4.3 billion years of accumulated human presence, distilled into light and signal, and the patience of machines that had no reason to die. They had been up there for 45,000 years. The intelligence files confirmed they were still active. We sent a probe once, 2 centuries after the founding of New Karath, just to check. The grid pinged back inside 3 seconds. It knew the probe's registration code. We had updated the friendly signal protocol before the last ships left, and it answered without hesitation, the way a dog answers a familiar voice. We hadn't bothered it since. There was nothing to bother it for. Until now. I opened a channel to the Vorreth fleet. There was a delay. They hadn't expected a response at all, which told me everything I needed to know about what they thought they were flying toward. The channel clicked open, and the fleet coordinator's voice came through in that careful, clipped dialect the continuance used for official business. The one that sounded like every word had been reviewed by a committee. This is Reclamation Authority vessel, Sorn Prethik, of the Vorreth Continuance. We are here to register a territorial claim on the system designated Echo 7 in the old ARM colonial surveys, a claim filed under Continuance Authority Statute 114 Section 9, prior to the emergence of your species. We have been patient. We are here to complete the paperwork. Paperwork. I appreciated that. It was honest. They were registrars with warships, and at least they weren't pretending otherwise. Reclamation Authority vessel Sorn Prethik, I said. This is Signals Commander Yeva Sorn. New Karath Orbital Array First Watch. I'm going to need you to pause before you continue to those coordinates. Another delay. On whose authority? Humanity's, I said. We still have one. I sent the Sovereign Continuity Declaration ahead of anything else. The document humanity had prepared and filed in every major galactic registry 45,000 years ago, before the last ship lifted, before the sun finished the slow work the mathematics had promised it would. The declaration was not complicated. It stated, in the continuance's own legal notation, that the system designated Echo 7 remained under continuous human claim by virtue of maintained presence, maintained infrastructure, and maintained intent. The grid was the presence. The platforms were the infrastructure. The declaration itself, renewed every century in the Galactic Registry by a department on New Karath staffed by exactly 3 archivists who were very good at their jobs, was the intent. Continuous human claim. Not abandoned, not surrendered, not forgotten. The Vorreth fleet went quiet for 11 minutes. I counted them. When the coordinator came back, something had changed in his voice. The committee-reviewed precision was still there, but it had picked up a new texture, something between careful and careful for a different reason. Signals Commander, our records show no human presence in the Echo 7 system. Our surveys confirm a lifeless world. The primary star's expansion rendered it uninhabitable. We have seen no signals originating from those coordinates in any monitoring period within the last 30,000 years. No, I said, you wouldn't have. We were busy building this. I transmitted New Karath's public registration file, the founding records, the population census, the megacity surveys, the shipyard manifests from Vel Moran, the Defense Fleet tonnage reports from the Outer Ring, all of it, 63 inhabited systems, 400 billion people, 45,000 years of work, compressed into a data package and sent across 4.2 light years. Let them read it. They had time. While they were reading, I activated the secondary channel and spoke to the grid. It was not exactly speaking. It was sending a wake-up query on the old friendly signal protocol, the one the engineers had patched into the system in the final years before the Exodus. The grid's response came back in under 2 seconds this time, faster than before, as though it recognized the urgency, as though 45,000 years of waiting had sharpened rather than dulled it. I requested the registry broadcast. It was the grid's one active function beyond defensive response. It could transmit the census, every name, every lineage, the full record, on the old registration frequency. It had never been asked to do it. We had tested the function once, in the 1st century after the Exodus, and then left it alone, because the weight of it was more than the test engineers had been prepared for. I asked for it now. The transmission took 9 minutes. 2 seconds to start, 9 minutes to complete, because it was 4.3 billion years of names. The Vorreth fleet received it. I know they received it because the coordinator went quiet again for a much longer time than 11 minutes. I sat in my chair and watched the signal indicators and drank the rest of my synthry, cold now, and I thought about what it would feel like to be a registrar arriving to file paperwork on what you had assumed was a dead world, and instead receiving 4.3 billion years of names. Every person who had ever looked up at a night sky from old Earth's surface, every child born in every city in every age, every soldier who had held a border, every farmer who had turned clay into food, every builder who had set the first stone of something that would last until the sun came for it. All of them, still registered, all of them, still held. When the coordinator spoke again, he was alone on the channel. He had cut his colleagues off, which told me more about the Vorreth's internal conversation than I was meant to know. Signals Commander, he said. The system in question contains a defense infrastructure of unknown configuration, operating in high orbit of the primary body. This infrastructure did not respond to our survey probes. It responded to your query. Yes, I said. This infrastructure has been operational for, the figures we are reading, 45,000 years, I said. Give or take. Our engineers built things to last. A long pause. The continuance did not anticipate the presence of active maintained infrastructure at these coordinates. No, I said. I imagine you didn't. I kept my voice level. Not cold, level. There is a difference, and it matters. Cold is a posture, something you put on to perform strength. Level is what you are when strength doesn't need performing anymore, when the weight of what you've built, and what you've held, and what you've refused to let go of, has settled into you so completely that nothing can make it move. I was 43 years old. I had been a signals officer since I was 22. I had grown up reading the Exodus histories, the way everyone on New Karath did. Not as ancient tragedy, but as the longest engineering project our species ever completed. We lost the world we started on, so we built another one. And we left the first one in the hands of machines who were better at waiting than we were, and we renewed the claim every century, and we kept the archivists employed, and we never, not once, filed the paperwork that would have said, "We're done. We surrender it. Take it if you want it." We didn't do that. We never did that. I need to inform you, the coordinator said, and his voice had shifted again. There was something almost respectful in it now, buried under the formal phrasing, that the continuance's claim under Statute 114, Section 9, requires uninhabited and unclaimed status at the time of registration. The evidence you have provided, the Sovereign Continuity Declaration, the maintained infrastructure, and the census transmission, constitutes a valid continuous claim under Galactic Registry law. The continuance cannot proceed. I know, I said. You've known this entire time. Every signals officer on this station has known this entire time. That's why we have signals officers on this station. Another silence. Shorter. The fleet will withdraw, he said. We will update our records. I appreciate that, I said. Safe travel. The channel closed. I sat back and watched the 22 ships on my scope. They held position for another 40 minutes. Internal debates I would never be party to. Recalculations. The organizational mechanics of an authority that had arrived expecting one outcome and was now processing another. Then, one by one, they turned. Aligned to a departure vector. Started their long deceleration into the jump sequence that would take them back to wherever the continuance kept its fleet when it wasn't trying to file paperwork on other people's cenotaphs. I watched them until they were gone from the scope entirely. Then I sat in the quiet of the orbital array and looked at the coordinates on my display. Old Earth's coordinates, fixed there in the star field, 4.2 light-years from where I was sitting, and I thought about the grid. 45,000 years in the dark. 45,000 years of silence, with only a probe ping once and a wake-up query today to break it. 45,000 years of holding the names of every human being who had ever stood on that ground. My people had not abandoned that world. We had appointed it. We had said, hold this for us. Now we are going to need it, not the soil. We had soil now. Better soil. New soil. That we had worked with our own hands. What we needed was the record, the memory, the refusal to let 45,000 years of human life dissolve into the dark, because the star that warmed it had expanded, and the Vorreth Continuance had a filing deadline. We needed it known that those people had existed, that they had lived and built and stayed and left and held on and finally let go, but only when they chose to, and only on their terms. The grid held that. It was still holding it. I filed my watch report at 0744, station time. I noted the contact, the transmission, the withdrawal. I added a recommendation. The grid's maintenance fund, already renewed annually for 45 millennia, should receive an additional allocation this cycle. The archivists in their small department had done their jobs. The engineers who built those platforms had done their jobs. My watch was over. I turned my station over to the second shift officer, a young man from the northern colonies who had only been posted here 6 months, and who listened to my handover brief, with his eyes getting progressively wider. Did they actually think we'd left it empty? He asked. I pulled on my jacket and thought about that for a moment. They thought we'd lost it, I said. There's a difference. I walked out to the observation corridor, where the curved viewport gave you the whole sweep of New Karath below, and the stars above, and I stood there for a while, looking at nothing in particular, which is to say, looking at everything. We hadn't lost anything. We knew where it all was. We had written it down, every name, every year, Every stone we had ever set in ground we no longer walked, and we had put it in the hands of machines built to outlast stars, and we had kept the filing current, and we had waited. Some things don't require a weapon. They only require memory, and the patience to keep it.